Oh, that was instant. Okay. Welcome, those in the gallery and those who may be watching online, to the April 20th meeting of the City of Oneonta Common Council Budget Committee. That's totally fine. Is that your budget committee just started alarm? Because it's right on time.
No, that was Alan.
Oh, hey Alan. I'm the chair, Katie LaPartishue. Shannon McHugh let me know that she could not be here today. Len Carson, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we are going to bypass the acceptance of minutes for now, and then I think I would actually like to switch, topics B and A. I just decided that 1 second ago, so that's nothing anyone else could have known. So for our last meeting, our finance director had provided us with a lot of attachments and work and graphs, and so, or not graphs, spreadsheets. So I just wanted to go over, since today we're going to be talking about personal service expenses and then getting into the administrative manual, I wanted to just go over one of the documents, the 2027 estimated wages and fringe benefits document that was provided. So I'm going to give it up to our finance director. I just let her know about 30 seconds ago that I'd like her to walk us through this, but you're good on the fly, so.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the summary report that you have breaks it out between wages, health insurance, retirement, FICA, and then grand total. So what we did to project 2027 is we took the current employees and took them through the contract grids, depending on which union they belong to.
That's awesome.
And then we also identified 1,500 for the administrators.
Okay.
And longevity steps, again, took them through the longevity step grids. It does not include any title changes. So for example, if we appoint fire lieutenants this year, that's not in here.
Mhm.
We do have, I shouldn't say that. We have estimates for title changes, but not going through the grid, if you understand what I mean.
So I don't understand, sorry.
So for example, the firefighter right now is a firefighter, but in 2027, that person may be a lieutenant. Right now, he's on the firefighter grid, going through, adjusting the salary, but then way down at the bottom of the spreadsheet, I've got a line that says title changes.
Okay.
So in case somebody gets promoted, we have it that way.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
you're sort of accounting for the initial difference in salary, but not going through the grid.
Correct.
And that was
Okay.
what, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, but that makes sense, right, we're only projecting 1 year, so, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So that was budgeted, the lieutenant's positions?
We're
But
looking
they were
at
also
next year, right?
budgeted- They were also budgeted this year. But they have not been filled yet.
So you budget them for a full year? And when do you estimate, or when does the fire chief estimate that they're going to actually fill the positions?
That I can't answer. I haven't been involved in the interviews or, any of the discussions on
We'd
that.
have to discuss that with our chief and get back to you.
But then that raises a good point, right, which is that I think we do that for all departments, not just the fire department.
Mhm.
And it might be, even just practically speaking, right, like if we know that an exam isn't gonna be until March, we wouldn't realistically be able to fill a position until April at the earliest. So do we leave those 3 or 4 months out of the budget because we know for sure that there's no way anybody could be filling that position?
The only thing that I say to that is that I like to show the full year's cost of any approved positions, so that way you don't have that much bigger of a jump in the next year. It's for example, we don't budget for vacancies because we want to show the council and the public what the actual anticipated budget is if all positions were filled. So
Right, I
also-
guess I'm suggesting a change, and I think it would be something that we would all have to agree on, of course, but, I mean, when you think about, I know what you mean, because then in the next year you have that full position, but the change from year to year would be much smaller, and thereby, limiting the amount of tax levy or general fund balance needed to balance the budget.
Yeah, and then also with title changes, for example, if there is, say, we do title changes in DPW, right? And we have a line for title changes in DPW and So we may have too much in the budget, or we may have too little in the budget for title changes. It all depends
Mhm.
on, obviously, the department and the timing.
Right.
But it is something to consider, if you want to consider that at budget time.
Well, definitely, I think, especially with the health insurance, I know we always budget for the family plan. Health insurance, we'll go down this and we'll see. It's like such a major expense, and coupled with the fact that if we know we're gonna have, health insurance line savings, we often, as a city, this is a royal we, will use that savings for other things. And I think if we really wanna tighten it up and hone in on what we're spending, then it makes sense to not budget the full year for salary and benefits for a position that we know realistically we can't fill for the first quarter at least, that's an example. Cause that way the money isn't there in the budget to be transferred to equipment or whatever.
Yeah, and on the health insurance, you're correct. Usually for vacancies, I will budget a family plan because I don't know who's going to get hired. However, last year, because of the budget constraints for the police department, we varied it.
Okay.
Because we had 5 vacancies. So just to bring the net health insurance budget down a little bit, we did, I think, 2 singles, 1 2-person, maybe 2 families, I forget the
Yeah.
combination. But we
Makes
did
sense.
modify it because so many of the police officers being hired, they're still on their parents' plan until they're 26. So, I felt comfortable reducing the health insurance budget.
Yeah.
But other departments, for example, if they go from a single to a married, and we have that situation right now in the fire department, we can end up $30,000 short in health insurance.
Right, because we don't know that that's gonna happen. Well, that's what I was just gonna ask about anticipating, so for the example that you just gave about, a police officer who's 23, we know that if they stay with us
Yeah.
in 3 years, we can guarantee that there's gonna be another $15,000 to $20,000 in their health insurance. So is that forecasted in generally?
In the 5-year forecast?
Yeah.
No, usually in the 5-year forecast, we take the current health insurance budget, because there's going to be changes in both directions, citywide.
Mhm.
So you may have a number of police
Yeah,
officers
so that may be
changing.
too granular.
Right,
That makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, so you may have changes in both directions throughout the city.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we
So,
got in the weeds
yeah.
immediately.
I'm sorry, let's go back to the lieutenant, since you raised that as an example. Did they take the test?
Yes, there's been a
believe-
test, there's a test. I did want to jump in, if I may, regarding the org chart and the question about budgeting for lieutenants or certain positions. So the org chart is adopted with the budget. Those are the positions that were authorized and budgeted to fill.
Mhm.
And I think I mentioned this in the finance committee when we talked about that last week.
Yes.
But for instance, fire lieutenant is one example shown in the org chart, even though it's not filled, so that would mean we can fill up to that position. Same example, like bus driver 2, we budgeted for those, we haven't filled them yet. We've got a couple of those in the budget, things in DPW, like we might have a water and sewer maintenance mechanic, but only have a maintenance worker until that individual or individuals are qualified and able to move up.
Mhm.
So I think it makes sense from my perspective, especially the way we're doing appointments now, where I appoint positions that are budgeted and included on the org chart, and then report those to the council. I think it makes sense to show what we're aiming for, like what is authorized in that, what is our ideal staffing for that particular department or crew, and then, may have something lower filled until we get up there.
Are you talking about the org chart or the budget?
Both, they're tied together. I mean, like you mentioned, should we budget 3/4 of a year if we're anticipating? I'm not sure how often we would anticipate waiting to fill a position. It might just end up being, in the case of lieutenants in this example, if they haven't been filled yet. I wouldn't have said in October that our intent was to wait until any certain time during the year to fill it.
Gotcha.
But if we had budgeted 3/4 of the year for that, then that would say I cannot fill that position until,
Right.
after the first quarter.
Right. I guess I'm just thinking about context, right? So there's police officers are sort of dependent on the academy. So if we know that the academy is later in the year, that would be a practical example where budgeting for the full year doesn't make sense because we literally can't hire someone to that position and begin to pay them until such time, right?
Yeah, I think in that case, you can look at it a couple different ways. I mean, not having, the academy starting typically in March, if you don't have someone for 3 months, or really it's gonna be 12 months that you have them on the street, until you have them on the street, you're gonna be incurring more overtime, most likely, just by having lower levels of staffing, so.
Right, but
You know-
that's happening anyway, right? Because
Well,
if they can't go to the academy, then we need the other officers to backfill, so we are incurring the overtime. And I'm
Right,
just
so I
saying, like,
think
don't
the-
budget the overtime in the position. Does that make sense?
I wouldn't, I'm not sure I would say we're budgeting the overtime and not.
No, I know that you're not doing that now.
One thing I just want to add to the point Greg is making is that by us doing the full year for that position, even if it's not filled, it gives the council the opportunity, if you need to overhire what's been approved because you know retirements are coming up, so you want to send 4 police officers to the academy when we're only going to need 3, once someone retires, or if somebody doesn't make it through the academy. Having that full budget in there allows you that flexibility. Do you understand what I mean? You remember like
Well,
when.
no, because we're also approving the number of positions, so we would approve the number of positions, and they would all start in March, right?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, say something happens from the time the budget happens to before the academy. So you've adopted the budget, and then in February, before the academy, or whatever, somebody announces their retirement that we weren't anticipating.
Right.
So now the police chief wants to send 1 more person to the academy,
Right,
but that person's not gonna retire until July.
but if
So
we're,
it gives you the flexibility to overhire if you want.
but if we're already drawing on fund balance to balance the budget, wouldn't we just hire, like we just did with the fire truck, right? We didn't budget for that, but we were like, you know what, pull it from the fund balance. Wouldn't we be able to do the same thing?
Yeah, that's an option you could do, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry.
So, yeah.
I know you still have more.
Yep. So I just want to keep going on the lieutenant. So Greg, the blue represents on the work chart, and this is as of April 7th of this year. Blue represents that it's filled, right?
Blue represents full-time.
Full-time.
Orange represents part-time. Green is a seasonal position typically.
So from our perspective, how would I know, looking at this org chart, that those positions weren't filled?
You would, they're shown as what is budgeted, so they're not shown as vacant or not. If you look at the
There's a graph, right?
finance report that I gave to finance last week, it lists, in the very front of it, you don't have it from tonight's handout, but there would be some graphs that would show how many are currently vacant.
This says they're all
On
filled.
this particular graph, it shows that they're all filled.
No, oh, you're looking at.
On page 25, it says it's.
When you say
all filled.
orange and blue, I thought you were referring to
Yes.
the
Budget?
org chart.
Oh.
So I'm looking at the orange chart, or
Yes.
the org chart, not orange,
Yeah,
org
so
chart.
looking
But I'm
at-
also looking at your graph, and it
Yeah,
says it's
orange and blue
filled.
is different there, so I don't
Okay.
have that open.
No, not orange and blue, just that, it says it's full. It says, right, so
Yeah.
the lieutenant's positions are filled, which means we would be hiring 4 more firefighters. So I'm just looking at the data that we were provided, so.
So on page 9, the finance and human resources org chart, I
Yeah.
printed that because that was the most up to date.
Yeah,
I
just a
assume.
moment, if you wouldn't mind looking
Yeah,
at
of course.
that.
So I have page 9 and then page 25 are what we're referencing.
And I just wanted to go back to what you just said. We're not hiring 4 more firefighters, but we would be promoting within the current year.
Right.
Is that what you said? That
So are you bringing in 4 more firefighters?
No.
No,
No.
no.
It's
Okay,
just like a
so-
control assignment.
It's just a title
responsibility.
change, it's a title change
Gotcha.
for current
Okay.
people.
So was the school budgeted also?
I'm sorry?
Was the leadership school budgeted also?
I would have to look at their training, but I do know that there was different things in the training for the.
Right, so I mean, here we are, it's April, right, so first quarter's already gone by, so to what the chair is saying is that this isn't a position that needed to be filled yesterday, right? They've been trying to get lieutenant positions for quite a few years. So to tighten up the budget, as she was saying, is this an opportunity that we could have looked at differently through the budget and said, well, we don't need to have as much, because we know we're not gonna hire in the first quarter, because when was the first test, or when was the test given? Is that December, January? I have no
That I
idea.
do not know.
Long
I-
ago than that, it was at least last year.
Okay, and then the results are out?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. At the time when we were putting the budget together, I did not know the timing of the lieutenant
Okay.
appointments.
Right. So if the school was budgeted, which means overtime was budgeted, because you're gonna have
Mhm.
1 to 4 individuals that have to go to New York City unless it's changed for leadership school, right, first line officer school. So all of that was budgeted? So the council approved that?
That was accounted for in the fire department's budget, and I can't say without looking the details now, if we
Okay.
budgeted all 4 of them going in this calendar year or not. I have to look and see.
Right, so if it was all budgeted, right, we could still as a council have said, well, we want to do this, but we're not willing to do it for the first quarter because we want to save on the overall budget for 2026 when we were looking at it in 2025. And I think maybe that's what you were getting at. I know that's what I'm getting at, is that maybe in these positions, the council should say, well, we can afford to do this, but not that.
Yeah, and I think my concern is that we routinely do this, and so we know going in that there's going to be vacancy. There's like a 12% vacancy rate. Does that sound right?
I don't know if it's.
No?
If you look at the other sheet from finance, it's a,
I think we're down to 12 positions,
if
right?
you want to look at full-time percentages, it's typically 4%, 3%.
Okay.
Depending
Okay.
on the month. Obviously, there's part-time vacancies as well as, so.
Yeah.
And those are based on number of positions, not
Okay.
budget. So.
I see.
So to provide the council that information for discussion during the budget, I can produce a report of any title changes that are included in the payroll budget, if that would help.
Do you think it would, based on what you
Yeah,
said?
because you would have the ability to say, well, this is another, what do you ballpark it? What do you think the lieutenant's positions are gonna cost?
It was, I think, if I remember the number correctly, I think it was $12,000 for the title changes that I had in the budget.
12,000 covers the cost of the school?
No, that was just in salaries.
Okay, so like, what is the total package cost?
That I don't have on
Yeah,
top.
that would be hard.
Right, because you would have the cost of the school, because you're paying the employee to go down there, plus the coverage of the employee, running the shifts,
Okay, yep.
the cost of the school, and then the bump.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like a philosophy thing, right? Like, I understand wanting to be as conservative as possible in this way by saying, this is the amount of money that we could spend if everything was perfect, right? But I feel like when we do that, what often happens, and again, coupled with the policies that we have in place, there are opportunities to say, as you said, well, we didn't budget for a 4th hire, but we're we find that there may be value in that. And it sometimes isn't, a position that's brought to council. Sometimes it's things that may not be. And I think that all of those things add up. So if there's less wiggle room because we are being really lean about what we are, and I think it requires discipline, but I think we're being really lean about what we're budgeting by using, not by saying like, well, hopefully we won't need, and I always just go back to supplies because they're tangible, but like, hopefully we won't need, 50,000 reams of paper, we'll only need 500, right? Like, that's a hope, that's not a real thing. But like, knowing timing of hires, that seems like something that we can reasonably predict based on, external factors like civil service, police and fire exams, stuff like that, where, we take those extra steps to say there's no possible way that we could hire this person before, XYZ, the very first date. So we're still sort of being conservative and saying like, if we hired this person on day 1, the very first day that it was available, not even how long we think it will take to find a candidate, but like if the academy isn't until March, then we can't hire someone in July or January and February, then I think we start to pare back some of these things that are that are kind of bloating the budget in a way that makes it easier to shift money around, right? And it's just a little bit more transparent, I think,
No,
for
I
residents.
understand. I don't think we're bloating the budget, but what we're not doing in the budget right now is we're not budgeting anything to add to the reserves. So when we do have these budget surpluses, because positions maybe aren't filled at the exact timing of
Right.
the year, we've got that surplus, so you're able to take,
Right.
our surplus at the end of the year and replenish your reserves with it.
Right.
So just please keep that in mind.
No, definitely. I think
Right,
one
this
thing.
is a different way of doing it, I'm sorry.
Right, that's
You're
good.
front loading, sorry, maybe bloating, not is a great word, but.
No, I didn't
you're
mean-
front
I couldn't
loading-
think of anything else.
You're front loading
That's
the
good.
budget, understanding that not all the positions are going to be filled. I mean, from the two of us being on council for the last 7 years, I think we're averaging 12 to 14 positions. It's just the way it's worked out, whether it was COVID or something else, we haven't filled the entire full-time staff. That amount of money has carried over to the following year. You do your audit, and we generally have $450,000 to $550,000 of surplus, but it's not really surplus. It's just that we front-loaded the budget, right?
Well, again, I want to be careful with our terms, because what we're showing in the budget for the wages is full staff
Mhm.
at the titles that we want to fund.
Mhm.
That's what we're showing in the budget. And some of those titles will have vacancies, and some of those titles will not become reality until sometime during the year.
Mhm.
So what that's doing for the council and the public is showing that if all of the titles that are approved in the budget are funded for one full year, for, the current year, this is what the costs are estimated to be.
Mhm.
So, and then,
But then we have to open our wallet,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so.
To have that
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah, so, so then, if it's not, like I said, it's another way of, possibly funding health insurance when, when we come to you and say, look, we've had singles go to family, and now we're $30,000 short. And, so it gives us, the ability to just transfer the funds around instead of appropriating more fund balance.
Mhm.
So, my preference, and trust me, I do not support budgeting for vacancies. I don't think it is a
Right.
wise choice to do.
Mhm.
And by showing the full expenses, it shows you where you need to be. You may not be there that particular year, but you're going to need to get there.
But it's kind of always changing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, there was a change to the org chart already in Q1.
Yes, but we tried to make that budget neutral. So you will see that we are trying, when there are changes,
Mhm.
we're trying to bring those changes to council and only show you if we need additional funds, for whatever the change may be. So for the 27 projections, what's in there for the wages is the current staffing, now, outside of the staffing, we also have projected vacation buyouts, because all contracts have vacation buyouts in them. And I base that on an average. So if someone else has a vacation buyout that wasn't included in my estimate, then the money is not there in the budget. So,
Isn't that what contingency is for, though?
pardon me?
Isn't that what contingency is for, though?
Well, contingency is for a lot of things. Like, for example, if we have a repair that we weren't planning on doing, could that come from contingency? So contingency is for really all the general fund services and the water and sewer. So there is vacation buyouts in there. There's contracts, for example, holiday payouts. That is another big line for the fire department. I have to estimate it based on averages, so that could be a plus or a minus. There's also, as I said, the title changes. There's estimated overtime. That could be a plus or a minus. So it's just, the estimates that are in the wages is based on looking at history for the unpredictable part, for example. And if we say we have a long-term employee retire, say it's a long-term police officer, they retire.
Mhm.
I've got them in the budget at their current salary, but if they retire during the year and I didn't know they were gonna retire, that's going to be a savings because the person that we're going to hire is going to be at the start of the grid instead of
Sure.
at the top of the grid. So all of those changes will happen throughout the year. And so when we present the budget to you, it's the best estimate that we have at that time based on the current staff. And then we try to predict for, as I said, title changes, vacation buyouts, overtime, boot allowances, tool allowances, you know, all of those different things that the contracts provide to the employees.
So we've completed the first quarter. Besides that budget neutral position that we talked about last time council, I believe we approved, what other positions, what other vacant full-time positions were filled?
What other vacant full-time positions?
Included in the report to the finance committee are any hires. So whether it's full-time, part-time, or seasonal, there's a, if you keep, I think it's, if you have the finance one, you keep going past the org chart. Towards the end, there's,
As of April 16th, 2026, is that when you're referencing?
yeah, so they, you know, there's a form, it's got my letterhead, basically, it says staffing appointment, fill vacancy,
Oh.
transit, et cetera, et cetera.
I didn't print that.
Okay, so those are what I provide on a quarterly basis, that look back the past quarter or since the previous report, whenever that was, here are the positions we hired. So we show in there if we filled something or not, and the summary shows, because obviously I'm not giving a report for every position that leaves, saying when we hire somebody and fill it, because that's the action that you need to review.
Right.
But the summary at the very beginning of that shows how many vacancies we currently have versus how many we hired.
Okay, so I don't have the tangible in front of me, so how many did we, full-time positions did we fill? That weren't filled before? That we budgeted in 25 for 26, how many of those?
Since January 15th, 2026, that's the last time we gave a report,
Sure.
until last week, we hired 2 full-time and 2 part-time, 0 seasonal. And then we had 1 temporary full-time reassignment, that was the first stage.
So Greg, still have basically 10 full-time positions that aren't filled?
We had 9 currently,
Nine.
and 11 part-time and 7 seasonal.
Okay, so, Ginny, what would that equate to in savings to the taxpayers, those 9 positions that weren't filled in the first quarter?
Well, first I would have to know which 9 positions are not
Well,
filled.
again, that's just keep in mind, it's a snapshot of time, so as of when I made that report last week, that's when they were vacant. Doesn't mean they were vacant the entire time, so we had some fluctuation.
Sure.
So
I mean, you get where I'm headed with this, right? So, again, back to what Katie was saying, is that if we recognize that we're not gonna actually fill in the first quarter of the next year,
Right.
that might be some serious amount of room. I mean, we were talking about $10,000 in the budget near the end.
Right.
This has gotta be, I mean, overall, it's gotta be in and around 70 to, well, no, 100,000 per quarter, right? So if it's 400,000, it'd be 100,000 per quarter that you can save.
Right. I mean, and I'm not saying that I think it's a good idea to do it based on like hope or guessing or anything like
No.
that, although I know that you do a really great job with estimates based on the history, but I think just like real context, right? Like knowing that certain things aren't going to happen until a certain point in the year. Because even though we will have to budget for that full time, I think, you know, saying that we're sort of avoiding the cliff for next year, but we're coming to the cliff now. When we hire somebody and we go from not having anyone in there to it being $100,000 ballpark, the cost, salary and benefits, we're saying it could be 50,000 this year and then 100,000. It only goes up 50,000 each year, as opposed to 100,000 today, but then we don't actually hire anybody, so it really only costs 50,000. But now we have $50,000. That's
We have to remember that's there.
right. Yeah.
But also remember that we didn't add any new positions to the 26 budget.
That's true.
So going from 25 to 26, there was no additional budget for new
Okay.
positions. So what we funded in 25 are the same positions that we funded in 26 outside
very true, but you also budgeted for the union contracts of 2% or 3%, whatever their contract is. So a vacant position, that number saw a 2 or 3% increase to go into the 26 budget.
No, I understand that.
But
That's true.
that's, kind of what I'm getting at is that we didn't have to actually budget it as much as we did. I definitely understand where you're going, but we didn't actually have to budget that amount because it's not easy on the taxpayers. And I'm not grandstanding, I'm just being a realist about what it's like out there, especially for small business owners.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, and families. But I think too, like, part of what I want to achieve is a strategic approach to some of the things we were said at the end of the budget cycle. We were trying to find $10,000 and splitting hairs because, there were things in these budget request forms that departments wanted, that, we saw value in for the community. So looking at these things that were presented to us last year, and knowing that list only grows, right? Like, we have to try to find a way to make some of these things happen. So I think at some point we have to try something different, because money's not gonna just fall from the sky. So if we want, admin support for Greg, which I really do, then we have to find $100,000 somewhere. And I don't know, I think we just need to try looking at it differently.
I can make
Yes,
can I
please.
make a suggestion and then ask you a question for
Yes,
clarification.
please.
So I would suggest that in the budget process, when we present the draft budget in October, we can indicate if there are any full-time or part-time positions that we do not anticipate filling for the entire year, whether it's at the beginning because of academy schedules or
Okay.
whatever else may indicate. So obviously, seasonal employees are budgeted a dollar amount, and that's seasonal. So we can do that easily enough. There's probably going to be less than a handful, if any, because we do have, I forgot to mention, we did have one police officer go to the SUNY Academy this year, starts in January. So
Oh, cool.
there may be a case where we're anticipating hiring and then sending them all to that. So, but we can do that. And,
Okay.
my other question was, like, generally, you're thinking with the issue of fully budgeting for these positions, understanding we're going to have some vacancies, is your concern that those savings are being transferred to fund other projects outside of personal services codes, like
Yes.
paying salaries? So I wonder how often we do that. We try not to do that, but we could, you could consider having that just be a policy, that we generally will not do that without discussing with council first.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I can say that in the past number of years, really, we don't transfer from any of the .1 accounts to cover a supply or anything like that. We're usually transferring .1s in between, like, full-time and overtime costs.
Okay.
Occasionally, we have used retiree health insurance or the department's health insurance to help them fund something unexpected. But that's the only time we've ever
Okay.
done that.
That's good to know.
But within the .1s, we don't usually transfer .1s to for another function.
Yeah, I think, given we generally try to avoid that and typically haven't had to do that, I think if you said anything that's personal services .1 or retirement or like other codes, that we would bring that through a council discussion before transferring from those
Yeah.
codes. Do you want to add that?
Yeah, the only time,
Address this concern.
Yeah.
For example, we'll use the excess for police and fire full-time to help cover their overtime. Those transfers will happen. But we've never, I don't think, historically, taken .1s and put them into .4s.
Okay. Or what about .8?
We have used health insurance, retirees' health insurance or department's health insurance to help them fund something else.
Mhm.
But we bring that to the council's attention usually, and we put in a detailed explanation as to why. I think the only time it went, and that usually stays within the department, I think the only time it didn't was when my department helped fund something for the mayor through the vacancy.
Go ahead. Yes.
So where I'm trying to get through this is that we have 2 department heads with us today, well, 3, sorry. What if the surplus from the first quarter is in DPS? I bet you the DPS superintendent would like to keep that money in his budget for the rest of the year. Whereas I think what Katie's getting at it's not like we've talked about this, is that we ended up with that 550,000 plus, that at the end of last year, we looked at a few different funds, and we moved money into those different funds, right? So I think it would do better for the departments if at the end of the first quarter, Greg, we gave a report and said DPS, because they didn't fill whatever full-time positions, there's a surplus, or they didn't spend as much in the salt box, you know, something like that. And those monies stay in DPS, and the same thing with transportation. I'm using that as an example because they're right here in the back row in front of it. But what if they keep those reserve funds that have been grown, developed through the first quarter, then the second quarter, in their budget lines, so that they can make those decisions as the department heads, rather than it coming back to City Hall, say, in the general fund?
Do you mean at the end of the year?
I don't know if we should wait to the end of the year, because I think as the supervisors or as the department heads, they know their department much better than the council, right? And so they know their needs moving forward.
Right, so that's kind of saying, like, what we haven't been doing is taking those personal services savings and using them typically for a project in DPW or, equipment purchase in the fire department or whatever. That the department head may say, well, I have these vacancies, I'd like to do this project, we don't do that. And I thought that's what we were trying to avoid, but
Right.
you're suggesting perhaps that which is what we do, those funds don't get transferred back to the general fund balance during the year, that happens at the end of the year. So if there's a vacancy in DPW all year, all of those savings and different codes would be there until December 31st, and unless they were transferred to some other code.
Right.
So they wouldn't go away, it would be available, and the department head could say, there's a need for a project we didn't anticipate, this is the reason we didn't budget it, it has to be done now, it's urgent, or whatever it may be. And that's when we come through the finance committee and say, here's a project, we'd like you to use contingency. A lot of times, DPW can transfer somewhere else because it's got a million codes, but you're going from a 464 to a 409, or somewhere within their 400 codes is where we typically look to transfer. And then if there's nothing available, that's when we talk about contingency. And then we still usually don't talk about point ones of the retirement.
Right.
We try to avoid that, but we could. We have occasionally.
I guess ultimately what I'm trying to do, sorry, is that if we tighten this up a little bit more, then we have the ability as a council to say, we recognize these funds over here that need help. Then we can actually put that as in part of the budget, rather than taking surplus revenue from the previous year, because that's kind of what we seem to be doing. We take the surplus out of all these departments, and then you came to us or come to us and say, okay, I have this much money, what funds do you want to put it to? And I know that's kind of bugged you in the past, so is there a different way of doing that? We could, I guess I'm also looking at, can we create a system that 2 years down the road, we know where we gotta be. We know that every year we're gonna add, say, 10% to the Parks and Rec. We're gonna add 10% to this fund. We put that as part of the budget rather than surplus funds from the previous year.
I would also prefer that. But so I just have a follow-up question, which is, and I do want to get back to that, but before we get totally away from this, is like, so if there are 0.1 savings at the end of the year, what happens to those if they don't get transferred to other codes?
So what happens at the end of the year, we look at the fund in totality.
So the 0.1 just gets melded
It
in.
just-
So we don't use it during the year.
No, we don't use it during the year. And then, so at the end of the year, and in your budget books, I've showed you where the savings under the different categories, and I tried to summarize them. I didn't do it by department, but I just said salaries, fringe benefits, and so on. And then what that does is it closes to the unrestricted general fund balance. And when that surplus is determined, that's when I come to council and say, now we can increase our restricted reserves. And so, do you want to put 500,000 in public safety? Do you want to put 500,000 in highway, or streets and sidewalks, or parks and rec, or whatever? So that's where those surplus money go, because we look at everything in its totality.
So until the end of the year, 0.1 stays 0.1, but then it becomes Parks Reserve, Public Safety Reserve, IT Reserve.
However the council decides to reserve it.
Right.
Or just unrestricted, you don't.
Or it goes right to the unrestricted fund balance.
And sales tax is the same way, right?
I'm sorry?
Sales tax is the same way, right?
Well, sales tax is part of the surplus, so you take all of your revenues that are not restricted, and you take all of your expenses that are not restricted, and whatever that net is considered either the surplus or the deficit.
Right, because we won't know, you have projections of what sales tax will bring in, but we don't know until after the year's completed, and you do your audits, usually by the end of the second quarter, we'll find out how much. That I can see as a system moving forward, that goes into what we deal with, saying we had this surplus of revenue. But
Sure.
tightening up the others is,
Well, no, I wanna go back to something that you said, which is I would like to, through this process, and I think just broadly as a city, get more into the habit of like, or at least this has been my perception, is that we do, what you were describing, Len, where like we have a surplus, which is sort of based on, you know, assuming that this is where we're going to be, and then not getting there based on vacancies or whatever. And then we put things into reserve, but I'd like to be a little bit more strategic, I guess, like you were saying, where, you know, we know that, for example, like we have all these master plans and strategic plans and things, and, you know, if we know that in, you know, 5 years, well, no, that's not gonna happen, but say in 5 years, we need to, you know, build something in Newa Park, and, you know, we have a projection for what we think that's gonna cost, or whatever, just because it's on the master plan for Newa Park, that we begin to put money away for that. And we're not doing it at the end of the year, saying like, oh, well, we had, you know, because I just think, I appreciate the idea of looking at things in totality, but we're sort of doing it, I don't know, quickly maybe, and trying to figure out what to do with these excess funds, where like, if we start from the outset saying,
I
we
think-
need to have $10,000 to save for XYZ, and we appropriate it that way.
I think what you're getting at is that you want to incorporate into the budget the amount that you want to put into reserves right in the adopted budget.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, you can do that, because
Okay.
you can adopt a budget where your revenues exceed your expenditures. You
Okay.
can do that, and then those funds will be automatically put into the reserves.
Okay,
We tried it in the past,
okay,
and that was the first thing the council cut.
sure,
Okay, because when they realized what the tax levy had to be to increase those reserves, that was the first line that they cut.
sure.
So we have attempted that in the past, but it was rejected.
right, but you're gonna have to change the way that you're doing with
Yes.
employees.
Yes,
And that's where, I guess,
Oh,
I haven't heard you
I-
say
I-
I'm willing to change.
Yeah, no, I understand that, if that's like, if the council decides to cut the salary line to budget for vacancies, that will be a council decision, but that will not be a decision I would support.
sure.
Because it misrepresents your total salary cost for your approved budget, for your approved positions. You're approving 141 positions, but you're not funding 141 positions. And that is where, that's what I don't support. Because if the state looks at it, if the bond investors look at it, just like I just went through the long-term financing last week and S&P. So in S&P, they asked all of these questions. I had to fill out 3 questionnaires, I had to do a phone interview, and we discussed the budget in detail of how salaries and fringe benefits are budgeted. They understand when they look at the financials that it's for full staff. Now, would their opinion change if I told them that it was vacancy staffs instead, that we budget a 12% vacancy rate? I don't know what their opinion would be, because that wasn't the information that I gave them.
Sure.
But that was a full, you know, it was a question from S&P when they rated our bonds.
Right, so when I was a county legislator, we had positions that were vacant but not budgeted, and that's approved. So that's what, I know you're not supporting this, but that's what we're suggesting, because that does bring your budget line item overall
Yes.
down.
One thing I know about the county budget is they budget like a 76% fringe benefit rate for every employee. It doesn't matter what their fringe benefits are.
Oh, okay, but
So when.
I'm just saying, when we're looking at each position, whether it's, we're not taking the position away,
No, I understand.
Right. It's just not funded.
it's just not
Because
funded.
that's the thing, is like your mandate, right, is that you are able to, without council approval, fill budgeted vacant positions. But if a position is vacant and not budgeted, then it can't be filled, which is what you were saying.
You know, I mean, my question is, what happens when we get in a position where we underestimate, and now we're out of
Sure.
money in those line items, and we have people, we're laying someone off, or are we,
That's a good,
you know, I'm assuming that's not the intent, but are you transferring from contingency? Does that mean we increase our contingency line? So if
That's
we
what I
budget
was sort of
like
Yeah,
80,
kind of walk me through that, Greg, because I'm not.
If you budget, we have X 20 employees and we're only budgeting 15, for some reason we anticipate 5 of them being vacant for the entire year or half a year or something. And so you're budgeting less than your full amount, and then you end up full. We hire 5 police officers in January and they all go through the academy, they're all getting paid all year, and we didn't anticipate that. Now we have to cover the gap. Where are those funds being transferred from in that scenario? From contingency?
I mean, that happens already,
And if
right?
that's the case, are we increasing contingency? Because contingency now is typically not used for
Sure.
Positions.
positions. Do we use contingency for overtime? We do that sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah, usually it's just for the fire overtime, yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
it's just something to think about. You know,
Yeah,
What
no.
happens the other way around? Now you're short.
Right,
And
and I
these
wanted to
From
ask
Fund balance somehow.
more about the potential implications of changing the way that we budget too, because you had mentioned the bond rating. And I'm just wondering if there are other things as well. So I think that's a really good consideration to bring up.
The
I mean, I
bond-
think we
yeah.
do, like, right, there are unanticipated expenses, like, all the time.
And we will be highlighting the bond rating report to you, but I'll just give you a little snippet of it. They were very, very supportive of our budgeting process, and even commented on how the council was willing to go over the tax cap the last 2 years, recognizing that the funds are needed.
Sure.
They
Makers.
were also very impressed on our conservative approach and recognizing the surpluses that we realize and that we're also strong in our restricted reserves.
So, are there any other implications that we may want to be aware of, other than the bond rating, of changing the way that we approach vacancies in the budget?
The chain reaction would be the changing from budget from year to year. I'll give you an example. Well, the state, on the state annual financial report, we have to show not only what our current budget is for the year that we're reporting compared to actuals, but then also what gets adopted for the next year. And they may question changes, and I just have to explain it to them.
Okay.
The other thing would be when our OPEB liability is being calculated, they will base it on the current census and future retirees. So that number may be adjusted accordingly if you change the process.
Sure.
The other thing that I'm thinking of is our liability insurance, because we have to report the number of full-time and part-time positions that we have in the budget. So that would be a chain reaction.
Okay.
And if I think about it some more, I'm probably sure I could come up with a few more items.
Sure. Good to know, right? Because if you've been down this road before, you might be able to help us anticipate and make a decision, an informed decision based on whether or not we want to do this. And I did just want to say that, like, just to clarify, I don't think that it should be based on hope or whatever. It would be based on things that would be reasonable to estimate. So there would be opportunities for, something to come up, but like I said, I think that happens anyway. So, it would be something where we just like guessed that we're gonna spend, $50,000 less in this code and whatever. It would be, I think it would be based in, what you already do, right? Which is looking at the history and kind of anticipating the context and using that as a.
I mean, currently, there's really no positions other than police and fire, where you could look and potentially the A&D academies, which are early in the year typically, you know, whether it's January or February or March, somewhere around there. Other than those, there's no position that we would say, we don't anticipate filling that until 6 months later.
Well-
That might be the reality, because we are recruiting and we don't find someone, or we fill it, someone
Right.
else leaves, you know?
Well,
But-
civil service too, right? Like if you know that there's going to be an exam, I know that's sort of changing, but,
Right now, there's like no exams, but,
Right.
but we still be potentially able to hire provisionally. So, I mean, we can
Gotcha.
look at that, like I
Mhm.
suggested before, I made a note in the draft budget in October,
Cool.
that we can indicate if there's something we anticipate, we are definitely not filling this for a certain period of time. There may be a few positions.
okay,
You can consider what you're talking about there.
right.
Yeah, and we could actually incorporate in the budget documents like a vacancy report. And we could show you
Okay,
everything that's in the salary and fringe benefits budget,
Mhm.
that is a vacancy line, and what relates to that particular vacancy. So that would give you the tool, I think, what you're looking for, to decide, to include it or not,
okay. Thank you.
or to reduce it, or.
Sorry. The only other consideration would be more of a perception thing. So if 1 year we budget in a particular department something lesser than the full amount because of an anticipated vacancy or vacancies, and then next year we're full, and we anticipate being full the following year. So now that budget, if you look at the budget comparison from 1 year to the next, it's gonna look like it jumped way up.
Mhm.
But that was because this year we might have anticipated vacancies, this year we anticipated full number of positions, but it's really the same number of positions.
Sure.
So you might look to an observer that this budget has skyrocketed or, you know, jumped up, why that happens.
Mhm.
Sure.
Right, and that's what I meant by having to explain the budget change, if it's over a certain dollar amount or over a certain percentage, and then,
Mhm.
when the different agencies look at it.
You have something.
Yeah, so maybe, I guess, we, as a council, we probably need to talk about this. So saying, looking at this strategically, maybe on a quarterly through Greg's report, we, the council, recognize what that monetary savings is from the personnel and make decisions based on that number of what to allocate those funds to.
Okay, instead of doing it at the end of the year?
Well, it's actually the following year. That's what we've been
Right.
doing.
Right,
It's
right,
not
right.
at the
Yeah,
end
because
of
we
the
did
year,
it
it's
for
the following
2024,
year.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think honestly, one of the things that took me a long time to like wrap my head around when I started is how by the time you understand what happened 2 years ago, you're already forming the budget for the next year. So I think that's part of the reason why I want to kind of flip-flop from this idea of, adding things to a surplus way after the fact, because we don't really get a clear picture in any individual year of what we're spending and therefore what we need to budget for in the following year, because there's such a spread, right?
So, like I said, if you want to budget for adding to your reserves at the time of adoption, you're allowed to do that.
Okay.
And Greg and I have both told you that we need $1 million a year just for equipment replacement.
Right.
And then $1 million, $1.5 million, I forget the number, we put on street repairs, which right now we don't have in the general fund budget. So if you can build up those reserves in that format,
That'd be
that
great,
would be
right?
wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I think that's the goal of this, right? Even from Mayor Butterman's perspective, was to start looking a little bit longer range so that we can start to make proactive choices like that.
Yeah.
So that it becomes less like, oh crap, this thing failed, and now where do we come up with $1 million that we didn't have? And so I totally support that, and I really hope that we can, I don't hope because hope's not a strategy, but I think that if we keep at it, we'll figure out a way
Well, you
to
can
chip
also-
away at it.
Well, I was gonna say, you can increase that reserve allocation every year. So
Mhm.
if you wanted to start out at 250,000 and just increase it, that slow and steady approach that I always
Yeah.
talk about, you just keep increasing it. That will
Okay.
get you eventually to where you need to go.
Okay. And I think that should be driven by the people in the individual departments, which is sort of what I think what you were saying, which is like, you know, if DPW knows that in, you know, coming up, you have 3 vehicles that need replaced, you know, obviously there are gonna be things that kind of fall outside of that, but like, if you can propose to us, like, if we spend, like we're doing for the, fire truck, you know, if we can put aside X number of dollars to keep ourselves on track, I think that would be helpful.
And that is what you're already doing with the restricted reserves, just, remember that.
Right.
All the restricted reserves that we have, which was very impressive in the S&P report.
Oh, good.
You know, by having those restricted reserves, you're already showing the public and the investors and the state that you're thinking long-term for your future investment into these capital outlays. So, do you want
We
me to
haven't made it
finish?
past the first
Yeah.
line of
Do you want me to
testing.
finish up on this?
Well,
Yes, like,
Okay.
rapid
Okay.
fire, please.
Yeah, so, health insurance, because we don't know our rates yet, we
We don't?
anticipated a 15, no, we don't.
Oh,
we
because it
won't-
starts in January.
Yeah, we won't know until October.
Okay, gotcha.
So right now, we've anticipated a 15% rate increase in health insurance,
Okay.
and we anticipated, or projected a 10% increase in the retirement rates. But I think the 10% is conservative, well, I shouldn't say that. It's hopeful, the 10% for the retirement rates.
Uh-huh.
And because those two are out of our control,
Great,
I do not know where they're going to end up.
great.
And then FICA is just that, I haven't read anything that the government's going to be increasing that percentage.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything more that you want to talk about here? No? Okay. I mean, that was a solid hour. So I really wanted to, get into some of these things. This is sorry. But like, you know, some of the positions that council felt was that were valuable, like the executive assistant to the city administrator. I know, you know, the fire department is talking about staffing. I think we have to talk about the fire department a little bit, a lot of it. And I did ask Chief Knapp if he was able to attend today, but he can't because he has something way more important to do. And I mean that not sarcastically. So hopefully we can get him here. I would also like to talk about OPT one of these days. I have a lot of notes on the admin manual. That's the only thing that unilaterally we can decide to change. Obviously the rest of the collective bargaining agreements, it looked like they're all up at the end of this year. Is that true?
No,
CSEA.
EDA and CSEA are up at the end of this year.
Oh, okay.
Police sergeants and fire go through 2027.
Okay, oh, right, because we just settled the fire. Okay, gotcha. So I would like to come up with some suggestions, give to the negotiations committee, which you're also on, right? It's you two, and Scott, right? I would like those to be based in real, numbers for the city. Especially because obviously, you know, it's gonna be compared to salary increases, so knowing what makes sense for the city to agree to.
Did you share your notes with me?
The admin manual?
We have to be careful, I just want to say one thing, we have to be careful, when we get into negotiations, we're not allowed to publicly speak about what we're negotiating,
Sure.
including as you know. So that's the only thing that I want us to be conscious of.
Thank you. Sure. Let's talk about the admin manual, shall we? And then, how are we gonna get into the fire department? What are your thoughts there?
Policy-wise, is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, yeah, I guess so. Just to understand how they can maybe do things differently to, and I know that Brian is really, you know, innovative in the way that he thinks about staffing, so, and just in general. So I'm not sure, you know, what really can be
Why
done
don't
there.
we do that next month and give him the opportunity to schedule around that?
That sounds good. I did tell him that that's what I was sort of thinking, And that, you know, I don't want that to be necessarily driven by, well, you have experience, I have no experience, you know? So I wouldn't wanna say, well, I think you should, you know, but I think understanding that they need to be operating in a way that's safe for the people who are responding to calls. But with what they have right now, they're really stretched, and so, or that's how it sounds.
Right.
And so, yeah, just figuring out a way to, without totally, you know, growing that
Right,
budget
making major
anymore,
changes.
right, making major changes, like what can we be doing differently?
Yeah, I think just send him a quick
Next month I will.
email, that way he can come.
Yeah,
That way he understands and has a little time to prepare, and Greg has
I would
Yeah.
time to.
just a process, I just, please direct your request for staff attendance to me, and I'll coordinate with them if you wouldn't mind.
oh, sure, okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I was gonna say, nope, it was about the fire department, but it's gone, so that's okay. Okay, so I did go through the admin manual. Again, you know, these are things that understanding, and I didn't have time, I probably could do it myself, but to go through this and, you know, see where folks fall and who has what in terms of, you know, sick days and all these things, but, I do have some thoughts on changes that we could make here to, address some of the compensation concerns that were brought up, in a way that might be able to offset any additional expenses. Maybe what I will do, for the sake of time, is edit make comments on the document itself,
That would work.
and I'll send it to
As
you,
if he
and I'll
does me, yeah.
CC both you, Greg, and Ginny, so that you can see the things that I'm suggesting, and then we'll figure out,
And Shane.
of course, yeah, and then we can figure out whether these things make sense to suggest for the upcoming budget. It says on the front page that, they need to be approved prior to the commencement of each budget year. I think it would be better if they were approved prior to the commencement, or at least closer to the commencement of the budget cycle, so I really wanna get moving on this. And I do have some ideas in there. We went over the org chart, I have these compensated absences to look at. What else? I almost want to, no, we can talk about that. I think I'm actually complete for today. Do you have anything else you wanna talk about?
No, I won't, if you don't mind, in the next day or two, send me your notes on that, so I get some time to really kind of dive into it.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay. And then I will say, because we have the head of OPT here, I would love to talk about the OPT and the enterprise fund, probably not at the next meeting if we're gonna do the fire department, but maybe after that one, which would be June. Just, I guess, well, I'm looking at Greg now. We'll see if that works for the head of OPT. Sound good? Okay, thank you.
Are we, just a question for next agenda,
Sure.
are we bringing both these items back? I have definitely the administrative manual. Are you bringing
Definitely the
back
administrative manual.
E as well?
I'm sorry, what?
You can leave it on there. Review of personal service expenses.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thanks. Thanks for checking.
Do you have any questions on the compensated absences before we adjourn?
Not yet.
Okay.
Thank you. I will. I did want to look at those, but I didn't get a chance to, so I'll have to do it for next time. But I really appreciate you just pulling that together. I was, you know, not, like, I would have totally understood if you were like, no, that's too much for today, so thank you. But,
Just so you know, it was done because I have to do it for year end, but it does take days to put together.
okay, I know, and I need to get better at emailing you way ahead of things that I have.
But no, but I mean, it was done.